Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar. It's all about the hidden costs of scaling global teams. So I'm joined by Simon,
Hi, Leah.
and
Hi,
yeah,
everybody.
he's talking us through all everything to do with those hidden costs. So I've just put a message in the chat so we can find out a few places where people are from. Where is everyone tuning in from today? And Simon, where are you from yourself?
So I'm originally German. I lived a long time in Mexico. If we have time, I can tell that story. And now I live in Spain since 3 years.
Here we go. We've got a few people there. Dallas. Nice. Lisbon.
Oh, see, Madrid, Spain.
Yeah. Indonesia. So we've got a bit of everywhere right now, which is cool. Okay, fab. So yeah, people are probably going to be filtering in for the next couple of minutes, but we'll start kicking off and sort of speaking about what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm going to drop a poll actually, so we can start getting people thinking about those unexpected costs. So let's publish this poll and get a little bit more interactive here. So starting off, obviously people have come to this webinar because there's many hidden costs of global scaling, but have you ever been surprised by perhaps like an unexpected cost from a vendor, which has made you feel a little bit sad, frustrated, annoyed that something like this has happened? Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, I guess a lot of people, and that's exactly why they've signed up today. So, Simon, do you want to sort of introduce yourself, start talking us through maybe what we're going to be discussing today, and then we can jump into that high level of what are these most hidden costs?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I'm Simon, currently the head of sales here at Remo First. I've been in the industry for about 8 years now, working for international staffing companies. I'm working for EOR providers. And I think I found the best one to work for, to be honest. We were just we just won an award for one of the 200 most loved companies because we do have a good work environment. So I like it here a lot. I love the product, and I love the industry, of course. Payroll might not be the most someone called not the most sexy industry in the world, but in the end, it's super necessary. And I see that people join us at this webinar. They're obviously interested in it, so I'm very happy to provide some more details about how much extra costs are hidden in EOR and how to find it and what's fair and maybe what's an unfair cost. So definitely ask questions if someone has a story to tell or has had a situation where they were not sure if the cost was even hidden, right, or it was not fair. Pop it in. We're more than happy to look at this and even take it live with Leah and myself. But yeah, a little bit general overview of EOR. So whoever joined and doesn't know what EOR is, I do want to make sure I give the quick elevator pitch. So EOR is employer of record. So that means a company that helps companies that do not own a legal entity in the country to hire and compliantly pay people, right? So figure in this example, a Spanish company finding an amazing engineer in Mexico, wanting to hire them. They don't want to open an entity for this, which is very costly compliance-wise, a lot of red tape. So they can go ahead and use an EOR provider like Remo First. We'll put them on their own payroll, pay them, and allow the employee to work with the company from Spain right away. Okay, good. Then, Leah, you asked me about the hidden cost, right?
Yeah, thanks for getting into that. I think it's good to define what that is. But yeah, I think this is all about those hidden costs of scaling a global team. So when you sort of go into looking at an EOR, what do you think are the most common hidden costs then? Yeah.
There is a lot. Sadly enough, there's a lot. So obviously there's the not hidden cost, which is the fee that you pay. It's sadly not a free service. But then in the end, there's a lot of cost that providers put in there and maybe not tell you, which can be really annoying, and can even be a compliance issue. But maybe starting from the beginning, we can always look at this throughout the employee life cycle. So when you have onboard someone, so you extend a contract or extend an offer, and then the EOR provider extends a contract. This is where the first hidden fees come in, hidden and unfair fees, to be honest. Back in the day, maybe 6-7 years ago, EOR was a much smaller industry, right? So fees were much higher, much less consolidated, and it was a little bit more of a Wild West situation. It was very common to charge onboarding fees. And then honestly, back in the day, that had a justification because most of the EOR was done what we call artisanal EOR, right? So literally a group of lawyers sitting down, typing up a contract from nothing, doing a lot of extra manual work. Nowadays, providers like Remo First, and even our biggest competitors, most of this is automated by good software, or at least by automated processes that run in the background, right? So charging an onboarding fee nowadays and not informing your clients about this is kind of a bad hidden fee, right? Because then in the end, EOR companies or good EOR companies onboard hundreds of people every month. So there's a lot of economy of scale that you have. So when you see someone charging an onboarding fee, you should always ask, what is the service actually providing with this, right? Do they have anything custom for you? If it's just an onboarding and it goes to the platform, this is definitely something you should push back on or look for a provider that doesn't charge onboarding fees.
Exactly. Yeah, I think if it's a software and it's a program that's already existing, this fee should definitely not be included because it's part of the package that you're paying for in the first place.
Yeah, and absolutely. It's like maybe it's a bit of a crude analogy, but when you start using Netflix, they're not going to ask you for $100 to boot it up, right? And this is similar. We have a model, and we're going to go a little bit more into the end of the webinar that we have a model that's very similar to Netflix, right? The month subscription, it includes everything, and it's always clear what you pay for and what you get, right? So maybe moving on, then you've hired the person, the company might have charged you an onboarding fee, and then it comes to managing and paying that employee. So this is the biggest bracket here. So in the payroll, there's a lot of things that companies add that are hidden, right? So that could be inflated employer cost, right? You could say that the state tax in Mexico is 3%, but actually in the state where the company is registered, it is 2%, right? So that means the provider pockets 1%, which might not seem as much, but this kind of adds up, and it's a fair thing to do to let, when you get asked about this, to let your client know, hey, this is what you're paying for. And then you have we call the shadow items, right? Just some line item that looks very legit, but when you ask, they cannot explain it, right? So in that case, this is something they add, and there's a lot of staffing companies do this by default. But in the end, with the market becoming more transparent, there being providers like Remo First who are very honest about what they charge. This is definitely something you should look out for, and you should always ask, what is this? How is this calculated, and why is it charged? Right?
Yeah, definitely. I think this shadow. I was just going to jump in there. I think this shadow item is like a really good point because it's things that like intriguing because you're like, is it there? Is it not? And if you don't sort of look into it and interpret it in a certain way, then you're gonna fall behind and it's gonna be something you're not aware of.
Right. And with an EOR provider, it's a bit of trust. In the end, you have to trust the EOR provider that they're doing the right thing for you. That doesn't mean that an EOR payroll is always exactly the same as direct hiring, right? For example, Leah, you're from the UK. When you get a visa to the UK, you have to prepay some of the social security contributions to the NHS, which looks like an extra cost, but this is just legislation for people coming on a visa and then being employed in EOR companies. But again, as long as it's explainable, it's all good. And it should be apparent to clients what they're being charged, right? I have wanted to do this in the end, but it fits really well here. Remember when I worked in Mexico 5 years back with this huge takeover deal from another company, And then what we normally do for large deals, we calculate the payroll for them and make sure, hey, this is exactly what you're going to pay, and we make the best estimation that we can. And I asked the HRBP, can you send me the exact salaries? I'm going to calculate this, right? She looks at me, if I'm like I ask a really dumb question. It's like, oh, no, you just have to multiply by 1.5. It's like, no, it's a staggered system, right? People who earn less might have less overhead costs. People who earn more might have more. So no, my current provider just uses 1.5. So what we end up doing, we calculated it, and they were overcharging 22% because, in their words, they were doing a generous roundup. That generous roundup was 22% of their payroll. So you could have guessed that we won this deal in 24 hours. And they all came over because in the end, it is okay to charge a fee for your service, but it should be transparent. And these are examples. It's not that common anymore, but back in the day, this used to be a very common practice to do a 2-digit roundup, which then in the end is kind of taking advantage of this gap of knowledge you have when you hire someone where you do not have an entity or maybe never been, right?
Yeah, I think it's not very fair to have that as the fee and the percentage roundup when that's not what it's meant to be. I think that completely puts sort of the cover over someone's eyes, and they think that they're being respected in what they're paying, but they're actually not, and it's not transparent. So that completely breaks down the trust between the provider and the buyer, which is never going to be a solid foundation of a relationship that's going to be something that wants to continue. So they won't want to be paid with them. They won't want to do the compliance. They won't want to be payroll because they know that at the very beginning they were sort of shunted by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the end, it's not just a services provider. We help people, or we help companies keep their most prized asset, human resources, right? So in the end, people get paid fairly, and it should also be charged fairly. And then maybe on the same topic is compliance. EOR is the large part of it is being compliant and is making sure that all the regulatory requirements are met. There is every once in a while EOR companies that go ahead and charge for compliance, right? Saying, oh, we had an audit and we had to provide all of your employees information. We will charge you $1,000 for providing them, right? And again, in many countries, it's a bit of a thing that is outdated, but when they have an audit, they have to print it. I've seen companies charging printing costs, right? I've seen companies charging cost for sending documents when the client didn't ask them to do it. But in the end, compliance is something local companies have to do. It's their employees, it's their payroll, it's their company. So if that is not explicitly stated in the beginning, they really shouldn't put this on the client, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it shouldn't be put on the client. As you said, they need to be open to knowing what those changes are and how they can be fitted into what they're actually required to do, rather than, yes, surprise fees and things that they weren't aware of.
Of course. And then, to be completely honest with you, a company that's based in the US that has a labor audit in Indonesia, it is not necessarily their obligation to follow this. It's the EOR company's obligation, and they have to do it in the first line. This is how we see it at Remo First. We are first line responsible, and then obviously if there's a cost to the client that is incurred by the client, then we might look at this. But from the get-go, we make sure we're compliant. This is our part of the agreement, and we do honor this. Maybe towards the end, this is where kind of the most annoying zone for any HR business partner or HR managers offboardings, right? Onboardings are always fun and games. Everyone is happy, and then 3 years down the line, someone needs to leave, right? Which it is more difficult in EOR, right? Because you enter a relationship with someone in a country that you don't know about, you don't know legislation, and you don't know the cultural nuances on how to fire someone, right? Personally, I'm German. We get fired quite civilly. They tell us to please leave, and then we kind of hang around the company for 3 months. In the US, we've all seen the movies. You get a big cardboard box, and you're out the door in the next 5 minutes, right? But you have to know how it goes. So definitely when you look for an EOR provider, ask for offboarding fees and termination fees, right? Because if you manage an HR team and you already say, hey, we have to pay severance because we're offboarding them and there's like a budget item coming through, your finance department is not going to be happy about an extra bill of, I don't know, $500-600 of an offboarding fee. Would ask, why would we pay for that, right? In the end, the service fee is paid for this month. Why would we pay for the offboarding? So this is something companies still do. There's only a few that do it. Some of them, honestly, is justified. It can be justified if it's very difficult on more offboardings. If there's extra legal support, but then honestly, just the everyday vanilla offboardings, there really shouldn't be a fee for that. Or at least when it is, the company should tell you, right, before, and then you can make a decision, make sure what does this employee cost you throughout the lifetime, right?
Definitely. I think, as you said, like these termination fees is completely outdated, because if somebody is terminated, it's something that's going to be happening anyway. So it shouldn't be an added extra annoyance or pain for the client that is involved in that. And if you can work closely and collaboratively and sort of agree on a timeline, share that document and have sort of that smooth transition, it's only going to help the person that's obviously been terminated and the person that is going to be terminating them. So having that, and without the hidden fees, makes it a lot more sort of flexible, and then without the friction element, because you don't also want to add friction to maybe an already existing tough situation.
Right. And then maybe the last point on the termination, which is definitely a hidden cost, and I think it's the most sneaky one, which is delaying offboardings, right? And this is definitely something we do take quite a bit of pride in this. If a client goes ahead and opens their own entity, we know how difficult this is, right? And we know how much money they invested and how difficult it was to get it set up. What we normally we agree on a specific time where the employees get passed over. This is the last time we charge a fee. There is has been cases where companies that employ the people are not sharing the documents, or they're delaying everything because by every month they stay with them, there's an extra fee, right? Which maybe have some economic reasoning behind this, but it's just definitely not fair, and it doesn't speak of relationship of trust.
Exactly. And then I think we've sort of gone through some most common hidden costs there, the sort of setup and onboarding, that payroll element, the ongoing compliance, which is going to be happening throughout that employee life cycle, and then of course the offboarding sort of termination part. But what do you think's the most like surprising hidden costs that you've seen pop up in various EOR contracts?
I think I wanted to leave that to the end because we gave a little teaser at the beginning.
Sure.
I wouldn't say it's the most surprising, but it's the first where we actually started laughing at it. Because it was funny, to be honest, and even the provider who did it for years, after some pushback, decided not to do that anymore, right?
Sure.
Good.
Cool. So then, if we're looking at the contracts themselves, let's look at maybe what people can spot in these contracts and have a little bit of an idea of where they're going to maybe see some red flags. So, what do you think are the top 3 red flags to watch out for in various EOR agreements?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you hire someone somewhere else, especially if it's your first time, you can never be 100% sure, because in ER there's always humans involved, and people decide that they don't want to accept your job offer, or that they want to leave after 6 months, or there might be that you're going to double their salary because they're fantastic. So it's not like you're buying a service for a year and then you forget about it, because you're going to use it every month the same way. So every month is different. There's going to be a lot of events throughout the life cycle that happen. So you have to make sure that your contract is flexible enough to make sure you have a good experience, and you can react to the shifting requirements of hiring someone, right? So definitely look out for one thing in the beginning: lock-in periods, right? Well, it might make sense to have, I don't know, prepayment or lock in something, but it has to adjust on how you want to hire and how your hiring plans can change, right? Because there was a client we had, and they left our product, and it came from another provider, and really wasn't happy with them. And then we agreed that they change over, they started working with us, and then they got a bill from the other provider saying, well, you said you're going to be here for 2 years, we're still going to charge you, right? The thing is, they didn't know that. The sales team never told them. So they basically had to pay for 2 providers, and we really had to help them get off the other contract. That's kind of the equivalent of buying a phone, I don't know, paying it off and then having it stolen. Really hurts
Yeah.
to still pay off the old phone and have a new one. That happened to me 10 years ago, because it's still fresh and it still hurts.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something you have to look out for. Then again, this is about hidden fees here. So if a company comes ahead and offers you this is all good, but it must make sense on how you hire, right? Because
Yeah.
then in the end, maybe you change countries, right? Maybe you find someone in Colombia and not in Chile. Then you would end up maybe not being able to use the service you buy for. How we do it, we have contracts that are completely flexible, right? They're just tied to the personnel. So if you hire someone, you pay for that. If you offboard them, then you don't have to pay for it, because we're not rendering a service. It's pretty straightforward, right?
Exactly. You
Then
pay for the value that you're receiving. So there's no employees, so no monthly charges. Surely it's that simple.
it should be. It's not always that simple, apparently, when you see contracts. But then obviously vague language on fees. Like we talked about good 15 minutes about this kind of menu of weird little extra fees and things that you can pass through. Then again, it's a service that costs money, and there will be charges for it. But in the end, it should be at least defined what the provider is responsible for. So when you see a contract and there's very vague language of fees that can be charged, ask, right? A good, and I've run sales teams for the last 8 years, a good salesperson should not say, oh, let me check internally how this goes, but they should tell you, what is this for? Or maybe make assurances. Yes, we will never charge you for an audit. We will never charge you to print a 12-page labor contract and charge you $60 for it. It should be very clearly delimited what the EOR company is responsible for, right? And what you're responsible for as a client. And
Exactly.
then
I was just
lastly,
going to say as well about this part is that with this sort of vague language, it's things like may incur additional charges. It's like these type of things are not going to make you feel secure and happy and with your initial relationship. Being transparent is the key of a foundation to a good relationship. So I think that vague language and what services are included, what the fees are, why they're applied, yeah, as a salesperson, need to be knowing that from the get-go and can answer those questions, definitely.
yeah, definitely grill them. My team is going to hate me for this, but if you're unsure, ask. If they can't give you an answer, turn around and run away. Good. The last one is partners. I quickly want to touch on this. As you probably know, EOR is either rendered through a partner network, which is vetted local staffing companies, or direct entities. There's kind of, I don't want to go too much in that direction, but it's kind of this, this, I wouldn't call it a myth, to be honest, but this idea that having an own entity will magically solve all problems and it's going to be fantastic and people are going to answer in 30 seconds and compliance is going to be flawless. But in the end, talking about hidden things, your provider should definitely tell you if they rendered a service through their own entity or through partners, right? And if they through partners, they normally should have language about that these are vetted partners, that they go through a compliance audit, that they have a certain requirements. For example, here at Remote First, we only use partners who have at least 10 years of experience, who have the right licenses, and who have real consolidated companies, right? So not just a PO box somewhere, and if an employee has a problem, they would get sent to a lawyer in Luxembourg. In the end, we make sure that the companies that we partner with to provide a service in a country are the best of the best, and our clients really like it. Someone just said, at one point said they drank the Kool-Aid on it. because it is obviously, it sounds a little more appealing saying, oh, we have our own entity. But in the end, in most cases, a trusted partner is the better way to go. I'm not saying having your entities is wrong, but there must be well set up companies and they must have a local team, right? And this is the baseline of good service. So back to the hidden things, check the contract of how the service is rendered. Because if you do a contract with a company in the US or in Dubai or in Germany, and they hire someone for you in Honduras, it's not going to be the same company. It's either going to be an entity or a partner, but you definitely should know this and you should know the difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think just touching on that partner model as well, it sort of ensures that real on the ground compliance, staying ahead of different laws that change and local changes, that they're sort of on that ground and they can help with the legal work and are legitimately there and know exactly what's happening. But I think they're sort of the three red flags I think are definitely things to look at. But if people are missing these and signing contracts and things sort of start to escalate, have you seen companies lose money because they haven't read the fine print?
Yeah, definitely. Right. So it's kind of the hardest feeling if you're upset about something and it's your own fault. It's always better if it's someone else's fault, to be honest. And this is something in MSAs that you should read through. And you should make sure there isn't like very explicit language and saying we're gonna charge you $1,000 if you want to have the labor contract in blue or in red, right? That's why I've seen companies lose money over this, especially with lock-in contracts. It's obviously good for some companies to get a discount, kind of for prepaid value, but it has to work, and it only works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, it is painful for smaller companies to do this because they lose funds. It's painful for HR managers who have a huge gap in their budget. From day to tomorrow, they get problems with finance and they say, hey, why haven't you seen this? So it's important to know what you pay for. It's not always going to the cheapest solution, but to the solution where you can predict what will happen in the future with them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Sort of see where that product's going to take you, and if it's going to be successful to what you're looking for from a business point of view, then that's going to be the good right choice. And of course, these things like locking contracts and things may not be the right choice. So you need to make sure that, yeah, of course, you are reading the fine print. Otherwise, you don't want to sort of lose out on that money. So I guess if someone is starting to look at an EOR provider, do you have sort of any questions that you would recommend they ask when they're looking and comparing these options?
Yeah, you can ask them if they're called Remo first, and if they say no, go on Remo first. I come and book a meeting with my team. But jokes aside, ask questions throughout the whole life cycle. Okay.
Yeah.
Not just what does your platform do, because a lot of providers nowadays who sell this as a software, which we would all love to be true, but in the end, we deal with humans and there will be paperwork involved and there will be questions. So a platform cannot solve everything. We have one of the most loved platforms on the market, and people really like it because it's super simple to use, but it's a piece of software. It cannot solve every problem you might have in hiring someone, right? So definitely go and ask questions. Okay, how does onboarding work? Can you show me how it works on platform? Can you show me what actually happens afterwards, right? Then you ask, how would the first payroll look like, right? What does the employee see? And then definitely, and this is weirdly enough, few clients ask this, and we try to bring this up a lot. What happens in a termination, right? No one wants to think about it because we all love our team, and terminating is one of the worst thing that you can do, as a manager. But in the end, it's necessary, right? So definitely ask, what happens if I terminate someone? Will you support me, right? Is there a legal team that can help me? Especially if there's a local legal team who can help me, right? Do I get advice? What should I do first? And going back to the fees, what does it cost, right?
So absolutely. I think it's, even though they're those basic questions, they're what you need to push forward in your decision. And yeah, I think the termination side as well, people think maybe as more of an onboarding platform, but it's a full life cycle platform. So I think that definitely needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always better to spend money on things you gained and spend money on things you lose, because you're still losing probably a good employee. And this is something you should look out for. Maybe another topic is looking out for FX spreads. We all know that currency conversions are not free. Banks charge for it. So in the end, it's good to ask, right? In the end, what the fee is, anything between 2 and 3% is reasonable. There, every once in a while, there's providers who just have unreasonable fees. Anything 6%, I'll say, is pretty predatory, because in the end, there is a risk with currencies, and EOR companies have that risk, right? And when the amount of payroll that we as EOR companies process, it is millions of dollars, right? But in the end, it should always be reasonable compared to the risk and the forward-facing spread that a company looks at, right? So you can definitely ask for this, right? And in the end, make sure that you have a fair value and understand the whole cost.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly why we try and keep it as transparent as possible. So how did we, Remote First, design this model that addresses these hidden costs?
Yeah. Our marketing team, just your boss, but they have found a pretty good word to sum this up: transparent and affordable, right? Because in the end, EOR is not about being cheap, right? And saying, oh, you can everything that you want for $99, right? In the end, it's about having the right price per country. There is a huge difference between hiring in Japan, right, where people stay with their employer for all their life. If you've ever seen that people get hired on university, stay there forever. So if you hire someone, the expectations are much higher, right? Except if you hire someone in the US, there's at-will employment, the risk is relatively low, and the cost of managing people is also lower. So what we did, we analyzed every country. We still do this. We have a whole team who doesn't do anything else than looking at this, and then we try to find the fairest price that we can. This might not be the lowest, because there might be a provider who is less compliant or uses a PO box company, or just use a little bit of maybe more of a sketchy setup, which, happy enough, there's not that many providers anymore, but there definitely are out there. And then we find the most affordable price for the quality that we think is necessary for this country, right? And this is our model. And then we say the price, it's the only price we charge, right? Maybe looking at the back end of Remo First, there is no price book or little catalog where you see all the different fees that we can charge. It's the country, and there is a number behind it. And clients, when they compare us, right, they normally just look at the fee. And then they find out maybe a week later, oh, and there's an onboarding fee, there's an offboarding fee, and there is a sunshine fee and a rain fee. But in the end, what I want my clients to do, or our clients to do, is make a comparison, look at what it costs, look at the service that you get, and take an informed decision. This is what our model supports.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about, as you said, being transparent, being clear, fair, but then also flexible, I think, are those key things there. And then obviously you are at the forefront of speaking to clients. Is there any sort of feedback when they are happy and discover that we don't have these offboarding fees?
Those are my favorite meetings, when they come to the meeting with this little bucket list. No, it's not a bucket list. It's that kind of like a checklist.
Yeah.
They go ahead and it's mostly procurement, to be honest, because procurement, they're very organized, and then they want to have all the fees, and they normally have an Excel table going on, and they go like, what is your onboarding fee? Like, oh, it's 0, right? And then what is your contract emission fee? It's 0 as well. And then we go through, and at one point, that's like, should I keep asking you the question, or is it always 0? It's like, it is always 0. There's only one price. And this is normally a very positive reaction. There is obviously a trust you have to build, right? But in the end, people like this a lot. And there's like two extremes on the U curve who like this. Small business owner, right, who is probably the CEO himself taking a decision, saying, well, I can go with another company, but I don't know how much I will pay, right? They might have like an offer that looks amazing, and then they end up paying more. So normally they tend to go with a solution like ours and say, well, you told me it's $399. This is maybe $20 more than one of the other providers, but I know I'm not going to be charged anything else. And then on the other end, huge enterprise clients who have a fixed budget. They have a cost center for this, and adding even a cent more for them is going to be a lot of paperwork and explaining. They said you said it's going to be $3.99. Where is this coming from? So mostly those are really happy about this because it saves them so much time and worry.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it would be great for everyone listening out there if you could sort of show how we set those expectations up front, that there will be no surprises.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to shout out our product team because they build a feature for this. Because in the end, when you hire someone and you hold the budget, there's two things or maybe three things you want to know, right? What's the gross salary? And are the expectations of this person met? What is the employer cost, right? And what is the overhead cost? And you take this overhead cost, you multiply it by 12, and you make it a little budget line, and then you know how much it costs, right? If there's a question mark on it, it might look good, but it's not going to be good. So how we do it from the sales side, we make sure we do a quick calculation. We have an internal tool that really helps us and is directly connected to our local payroll providers to make sure we're always up to date. We have a team that every single day checks 182 countries for changes, right? It might not be the most exciting job in the world, but they're always informed about PTO, and when there's a new holiday. I personally noticed in Spain, I think we have one or two people from Spain here. Spain changes them randomly. They just said, well, there's a public holiday on Friday now. So it has to be updated, and it obviously affects payroll to some extent, right? So what we do, we make sure clients understand the cost. Explaining our fee structure is stupidly simple. We just give you one price and that's it. And then we make sure they have the most accurate budget number they can have, right? Then for every subsequent hire, this platform itself will pre-calculate how much it will cost. Because to give an example, you hire in Europe, and then you have countries in Europe where the overhead costs are very low, and then you go to countries maybe like France or Portugal where it is just so much higher than you thought it would be, and you really don't know how to make put the gross salary and the budget in sync. So when you onboard someone, you will immediately see how much it costs, and then you can always stop the onboarding process, maybe go back to your stakeholders, get more budget, or say, oh, well, I miscalculated this. Maybe we can even pay more salary, make someone happier, right? So you can do this right through the platform. It's auto compliant. It's directly connected to the calculators, which is a pretty unique feature in our industry. So this is how I make sure people know exactly what they're paying for.
Yeah.
Are people happy that they have to pay 47% on top in France? Probably not, right? Especially when they come from low overhead cost countries. But in the end, they know they take an informed decision and they have peace of mind.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what hiring anywhere looks like, doesn't it? And setting those expectations up front, I think, really helps people, again, trust through transparency. I think there's some keywords taken away from this webinar. And then I guess this surprise fees story, I need to hear it. What is one of the sort of weirdest or maybe most surprising hidden costs that you've seen pop up?
Now you hyped it too much. It's a little bit drier than you think, but it made me laugh at least, because before being in the US industry, I used to work at in consulting, right? PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big four, and as you probably know, there is prices by the hour, right? Like a measly analyst like me back then, probably $150, $200. If you go up to the directors, that gets expensive to get their time, right? So I had this client that came up to me, and we went through the whole list of all of the fees. And in the end, well, I do have to ask you how much your manager and director hours. I say, what do you mean? Oh, the company I work at, whenever they mess up, right, and they don't want to explain it to me, they have a director come on and just explain it in nicer words, and then I get a bill for $550 an hour for the director hour. So then we told them, hey, well, if you never signed this, well, just don't pay it. And in the end, actually, the provider stopped doing this, because then in the end, if you hire a consultant, you wanted to have the service. you don't need someone with a better title to explain how they messed up. So yeah, that was kind of the weirdest hidden fee I've ever seen.
Definitely. And then sort of summarising everything that we spoke about, from sort of those hidden costs to questions to ask and those red flags, do you think you could give one piece of advice for someone looking to evaluate or even look into an EOR provider right now? And then what would that be?
Definitely understand the benefits of hiring internationally, which at most points our clients have already found the talent. They're really happy that they found someone, or they're expanding into a new country, or they found just the best talent in the country, don't have an entity. And then making sure that you understand what you're looking for and what you're getting, right? So make sure that the provider has good local benefits, right? Make sure they understand the country. Definitely always ask for a calculation, or at least an estimate of how much it will cost. And definitely make sure, and this is again grilling the salespeople, that the salespeople have a baseline understanding and can guide you. If you find someone who will always say, "Oh, I don't know, I just sell the software, I'm going to connect you with the local expert," this is probably going to be a theme throughout this whole company, that they have siloed knowledge. But in the end, at Remofirst, we all understand at least the base layer of payroll. We understand how HR works. We understand the risk, because we have a lot of training on this, and we have a lot of people who come from the industry. And most of us are pretty seasoned payroll nerds. So if I make sure that the whole company understands the situation that you are in, and can help you navigate this. Because again, you're not buying a software, you're not buying a consulting service, you're buying an employer of record, right? So they should act as one.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good finishing point there. Thank you, Simon. Okay, everyone, we're just going to jump into a little Q&A at the end. If anyone's got any questions, to pop them in the Q&A, that side, sorry, at the bottom of the chat. So there's someone that's just come in now, quite a specific question actually. I was trying to get someone in Spain to provide us with 2 engineers. Asked for a 3-month deposit, even they had no seniority for the severance. Yeah, can we jump into this?
Sure. Then in the end, deposits, pretty known fact in EOR, because in the end, the moment you start the month, you already owe the employee payroll, right? So many providers, including us, take a deposit. It could be 2 months, to be 1 month. We through the board charge 99% of the countries charge just 1 month, because it's normally enough to cover for the notice period and cover for the outstanding vacation days, even in a resignation, right? But when I look at this, Spain, I live and work in Spain and I have a labor contract here. I know that severance is a month per year worked. And then asking for more deposit than 1 month is reaching, to be honest. If whoever asked this, this is definitely a lot. If you would ask to have seniority taken over and put this in the contract and ask for more assurance for your employee, that's definitely something you can negotiate with a provider. 3 months for no seniority is triple the amount of risk the provider actually has. And that is, I don't think, is fair.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that. And then we've just got another one. I just need to get into that. So social security contributions are always higher than initially quoted. How can I tell if my current EOR is overcharging me?
All right. So it can happen that you have an initial simulation, as we call them, quotes or simulations, because we maybe don't know a certain fact. For example, in Spain, they have something which is really valuable. If you care for an elderly parent or for a disabled child, you do have some tax benefits, and you end up paying a little bit less, which could affect the overhead costs, right? And there's many of these cases where just the payroll looks different. I would definitely ask that if it's more than 5 or 6%, because I would say in most countries is the range of difference, that how these programs go. Definitely ask, right? And ask why. Then again, the EOR provider might have an extra insurance that is in there that you not have in a normal calculation, or there might be in a different collective bargaining agreement than you've calculated. What definitely stay away from is using these online calculators to make the benchmark, because many of them are good, but not all of them have the same parameters, right? So they're a good way to kind of get an idea of where to go, but definitely ask the provider, hey, can you just run me through, this is 20% more, why is that? In most cases, this is how most of our cases end, there's a good explanation for why it's just different from the initial quote, but it definitely helps to ask.
Yeah, definitely. And we've just got one more come in. We're trying to hire from the Philippines. Is there still some credence into paying for an EOR to ask for a percentage of the annual salary of the hire for the onboarding, even if we are the ones to do the recruitment ourselves?
That is, I don't know, like our younger colleagues said, it's a boomer move. Back in the day, maybe 10 years ago, that was the go-to rate to charge, right? You would charge 16% of salary was more kind. That's just not how we do things today anymore, right? Because all good EOR companies have a good risk assessment model. They can live with flat fees. I would definitely shy away from percentage fees, right? If it's not a very specific country, like there's some island nations where this is necessary because of the contributions. In the end, I would recommend reach out to us. We have the Philippines at a very good price. We hire a lot of people there. We have a great office there. So definitely make sure that you have a provider with a flat rate, right? Because you don't want to give your employee a raise and then also pay more for the service, even though you're not receiving anything else.
Absolutely. I think that's it from the Q&A. So thank you so much for answering them. It was really nice to get like a unique spin on a few different questions there. I'm just going to open up a final poll. If anybody is a little bit more interested in the EOR, maybe wanting to swap services, I just put a poll about a demo that could be possible. So if you'd like to vote there, we can always reach out to you or request a demo yourself. But thank you so much, Simon. This has been so interesting, finding out everything from those hidden costs to the surprises that you've seen, red flags, how companies have sort of failed, and then what you should look for there. So thank you so much for today, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.